Hi everyone, this is Mr. Zirkle, and this video discusses fishing and aquaculture. For centuries, commercial fishing boats have been catching Atlantic cod from the fishing grounds off the coast of Newfoundland. However, new technology in the 1960s and 1970s greatly increased the catch of this economically valuable fish. In 1968, over 800,000 tons of Atlantic cod were caught. This level of fishing was not sustainable, however. The maximum sustainable yield had been surpassed, and by the early 1990s, populations were so low that the entire fishing industry in the area collapsed. 20,000 to 40,000 fishermen lost their jobs, causing severe damage to Newfoundland's economy. Since then, Atlantic cod populations have remained low, and some scientists doubt that the population will ever recover. A fishery is an organized effort by humans to catch fish or other aquatic species, mostly for food, but in some cases for other products like fish oil. There are two types of fisheries. Wild fisheries, sometimes called capture fisheries, are geographic regions where humans fish for economically valuable fish species. This is the most common type of fishery. The other type of fishery, called farmed fisheries, usually occur inland where humans breed, raise, and farm a certain type of fish. Let's take a look first at wild fisheries. In wild fisheries, there are a number of industrial fishing methods used to catch fish, many of which have harmful effects on other species or the environment itself. In the purse-seine method, a school of fish is spotted by plane and a large net is dropped and drawn tight. This method is useful for surface-dwelling species such as tuna, mackerel, and anchovies. However, sometimes dolphins can get caught in the nets and die. In the long line method, hundreds or thousands of baited hooks hang from a single line, sometimes 50 to 100 kilometers long. Lines are left hanging for hours or days and then hauled up where a machine impales the fish on the hooks. When this method is used, a large number of bycatch are caught and thrown back dead. Bycatch is a term used to describe fish or other species that are caught unintentionally and which are not economically valuable. In addition to large numbers of bycatch, seabirds such as albatross can get hooked when the lines are near the surface, and sea turtles and sharks can also become victims. Drift nets are long expanses of nets that hang down in the water. As with long lining, bycatch is a significant problem. In the 1980s, 10,000 dolphins and whales and millions of sharks were killed by drift nets. In the United States, drift nets may only be 1.7 miles or less in length, and in 1992, the UN banned drift nets longer than 1.5 miles in international waters. A final industrial fishing method that we want to take a look at is bottom trawling. Bottom trawling involves taking a funnel-shaped net and dragging it across the ocean floor in search of species such as flounder, shrimp, and scallops. This is the most damaging type of fishing method, analogous to clear-cutting a forest. Much of the habitat on the ocean floor is destroyed or changed significantly during the passage of the weighted net. In this picture, you can see what the ocean floor looked like before and after the trawling net moved through. The industrial fishing methods we have just talked about have taken their toll on the world's fish populations. The World Wildlife Federation estimates that the amount of fish in the oceans has been cut in half since the 1970s and estimates that some commercial fish stocks, such as tuna and mackerel, have fallen by almost 75%. This widespread reduction in fish and other marine organisms is occurring because it's difficult to protect marine biodiversity. Most damage to oceans isn't visible to human beings. Because the ocean is so vast, people view it as inexhaustible. And finally, most of the world's oceans lie outside of any country's legal jurisdiction, making it an open access resource. As such, it is easily overexploited. Yet another example of the tragedy of the commons. So what can we do to prevent further decline? Well, lots actually. First, we need to continue to monitor and estimate fishery populations. We can also set lower catch limits on economically valuable species whose population are crashing. We can reduce or eliminate fishing subsidies that are given to fishermen and companies. We can establish no fishing areas and protected areas. And we can label sustainably harvested fish. Sustainably harvested fish are those species that are caught or farmed in ways that take into account the long-term well-being of the species. Educating the public by publicizing overfished populations is another way to prevent decline. We can reduce bycatch, and we can also kill invasive species. In the first part of this video, we discussed wild fisheries. Now we turn our attention to farmed fisheries, also known as aquaculture. The global harvest from wild fisheries, as you can see in this graph, increased up through the 1990s, but has since leveled off. From the 1990s onward, however, aquaculture or farmed fishery production has exploded. Farmed seafood products currently make up half of the world's seafood supply. Aquaculture involves growing, stocking, feeding, and harvesting freshwater and saltwater populations under controlled conditions. Aquaculture includes fish farming, shrimp farming, oyster farming, seaweed farming, and the cultivation of ornamental fish. This is usually done in contained areas which may be located either in coastal waters or inland freshwater areas. Proponents of aquaculture say there are many reasons why we need to increase its use. Most notable is the idea that the catch from wild fisheries has leveled off, and many species have been overfished. Additionally, raising seafood is a highly efficient way of getting protein. Much of the food they are fed is converted into their growth. Also, because the farms are contained in areas near the coast, it requires small areas of water and little fuel. Economically, aquaculture creates jobs and helps feed a growing population. Critics, however, raise some concerns. Aquaculture can pollute water with excess nutrients, which come from fish feed and fish waste. What would normally be spread out over vast areas is now contained in much smaller areas. This can also lead to an increase in disease in the populations. This is especially true for farm-raised salmon, which can easily get parasites and sea lice, and which can then spread to wild salmon. Because of this, antibiotics need to be given to the farm-raised fish. These antibiotics also end up as pollutants. Aquaculture can also compromise the native gene pool of a species if they are allowed to interbreed with farm-raised species. Economically, fish farms threaten the livelihood of local fishermen and compromise the aesthetic beauty of the coastline. To conclude this discussion, it's important to realize that if we want to feed a growing human population, a balance will need to be established between aquaculture and wild fisheries, which are fished sustainably. All right, well, that's the end of this video. If you have questions or concerns, please message us. Otherwise, we'll see you soon.